Yeah, actually, if Sue, if you just start sharing, it'll just take over.
Okay, let me see if it will work.
Yeah, everybody can kick everybody else off, which is nice.
And mine, for some reason, will not share. It just drops down the tray that I would normally start sharing, and it does not do anything. It's been that way for all of the trainings I've had with you.
I'm sorry, I didn't fully get that. Can you repeat?
So when I click on the arrow to open the share tray, there is nothing in my share tray at all.
Oh, that's weird. So you can't share screen or window or anything?
No.
Martin, any ideas on that one?
I can probably try bumping our session for now and connecting it.
I don't think that's a session issue. I think that's a Microsoft Teams issue. Sue, are you using the Teams app or the website or?
I'm using the Teams app, I believe.
Or on Windows or on Mac?
On Mac.
Oh, that's probably why.
I'm using it on Mac too. It works for me.
Yeah, well, you need to enable screen sharing and screen recording, I think, and security.
Ah, that's probably true. Let's see. Are you familiar with how to do that, Sue?
I don't know if I have authority to do that.
Oh, so you don't actually have admin rights to the Mac you're on?
No.
Okay. Well, that might present a problem for screen sharing right now. Let's see if we can at least talk you through the steps of getting connected to the file.
Perfect.
Screen sharing is secondary. Access to the database is the most important.
Okay.
So you were on this before.
Yeah.
So it should just be getting into the training environment as you did before. And then you might even actually see the file called improved training as a recent file.
Okay, let me look in.
It should have FileMaker Pro open for sure, for what I see on the training server. FileMaker Pro is open in our session, so.
Okay, let me see what. Okay, so what I've got on my recent ones is the Intermediate Training Launcher and the Coastal Corners in Launcher. Okay. Oh, I maybe have it. Okay, and I'm looking for, you said improved training? Yep.
Yeah.
But are
you in?
I clicked on it and it brought me up to the same three. The Intermediate Training Launcher and the Coastal Corners in Launcher. Is it one of those?
Oh, yeah. So it sounds like you're looking at the list of all of the files hosted. If you change that to list view and scroll to the bottom, there should be one at the very bottom called improved training.
Okay, let me get back to that screen. Okay, there is one called improved training.
Yep.
Oh, there it is.
And then whatever password you set should work. Let me check that you did. I thought I did it a second ago. Oh yeah, you set your account name as, or I set your account name either way as Susan.
Okay.
And then whatever password you changed it to is your password.
You know what? I'm not finding it right off. It might be faster just to do a different one.
All right, I'll reset it right now.
Perfect.
Would you rather your account name be Susan or Sue?
Doesn't make any difference, whichever's easy.
Let's leave it as Susan, and I'll still reset the password right now.
Okay.
So if you use the word training all lowercase, it should let you in.
I am in.
Great. Let's dive right in then. Okay, first a quick caveat. Last week I had a little medical issue. I woke up and part of my face was paralyzed, and I was diagnosed with Bell's palsy. So the left half of my face now is entirely paralyzed, basically. My eye won't open or close, and the left half of my mouth doesn't work, which means you're probably I'm gonna sound a little bit different. I sound very different to me. So if you can't understand me, ask me to repeat and I'll try to enunciate as clearly as I can. Otherwise, this has really no effects on my life. I'm just trying to learn how to adapt with it while it takes several months for the condition to clear. So we're going to start with a little bit different part of the agenda. We're going to dive right into looking at some calculations that I think are core. And right while we're all fresh, I'm going to challenge you guys with some fun things. I'll start by sharing my screen. By the way, I'm not going to be sharing video because you don't want to see me. It's not fun to look at. So I don't know if we actually got advanced tools turned on in the beginning class, but you do need this menu. So everyone should be at the screen now in FileMaker. And if you don't have a tools menu, does anybody not have a tools menu?
I do not.
Okay.
I don't either.
I'm really glad because it's it's a good thing to actually all look at. Here's how you turn it on. You go to the edit menu, to preferences, and you click the box, use advanced tools. And then when you click OK, it'll force you to restart FileMaker. So then when you do that, you just quit FileMaker and then launch it again. And then go back into your, if you go to recent, you just can go straight back into improved training and log on as you.
I did not get the box to redo it. Do I just automatically get out?
Yeah, it doesn't automatically quit. You have to go and quit FileMaker manually after you click that box. Once you do, the tools menu will be there.
Magic.
Got it? Okay, so in the tools menu, everyone can go to Data Viewer and follow along. And we're going to start with two key calculations that are perhaps not, well, they're really important. I'll put it that way. They're things that I think, I feel very strongly that you should all have some facility with going through this class. So we're going to be using them a lot. And the two functions we're going to be learning are case and let. So on this tab in the data viewer, you have two tabs. On the current tab, this shows you the script that's being debugged while you're working. We're going to be working with that in this class as well, but not right yet. And in the second tab, watch, when you click it, it'll probably be empty. But I have a whole bunch of things in here because I use this all the time. And so this saves functions that you're working on. It's like a clipboard, like a scratch pad, if you will. It's not part of your database. It's there for use in any database you work with, and it's really convenient to reference. So we might have played this a little bit. So go and click on the plus in the lower right corner to add expression. And then just to see how this thing works, you can type in something like 1, 2, 3 plus 4, 5, 6. And if the checkbox is checked for automatically evaluate, you'll see the math add up down here. I think we did all this in basics, right? Maybe not.
We did, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So now, yeah, we're definitely going to pick up where we left off on that. We talked about this calculation window. We definitely talked about a good amount, but we didn't really get too deeply into it. We talked about the 4 panes. This is all of your data fields, the main area that you write your calculation, the operators, and the complete list of all the functions that FileMaker has at your disposal. We're going to be looking at 2, case and let. So just I can't, getting ahead of myself here. So when you type case, it automatically puts it out here with a long kind of a function with a bunch of stuff that you don't really need. And then let kind of looks even longer. It has square brackets and curly brackets and a bunch of other things. So we're going to unravel all that stuff right now. We're going to start with a really simple one. And I'll have all you guys follow along. And we're going to actually have it look at a specific record in the database. So if you're flipped to some record, we'll write a case statement that evaluates something to be true to display on the layout only if a certain thing is true about the record. So here's what we're going to write. Case. And then what I always do is I format it like this. I delete the stuff that's in the middle, so I just have case, open and close parentheses. Mm-hmm. And on each line of a case statement is two things, a test and a result. So test, semicolon, result. Right? That won't actually evaluate right now. And then if you put another semicolon in, you can have another test and another result. As many as you want. And the very last line is the thing that's true if none of the other tests are true, which I call the failover. So the usual way that I like to write these is the case on a line by itself, each test and result on a line by itself, a failover on a line by itself, and then the final parentheses at the bottom. Okay, so we're going to write one that says if the city for this particular, actually, let's say the state because it's shorter. If the state of this client is California, so I'll just double click down here, state equals, and then quotes California, or just CA. Then I'm going to put the word local. And that's a very simple case statement. By the way, a case statement can only have one line and does not have to have a failover line. So it can basically be as short as a single test and a single result. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to say this far. So hopefully you guys can get something that looks like this. You can pick a different field, you can pick a different state, whatever you want to do. But the key is you've got one thing that's not in quotes, which is the actual field from your database. It's testing to see if it matches a specific string, which is in quotes, and then displaying a result, which is a string in quotes. Then if I click monitor, it will show me the result down here. And if I flip through records, I can see this one's not California, so it's blank. This one is California, so it says local. Everybody with me?
Yep.
Okay, I did not, I think, do it with the table.
Oh, so you didn't double click, you just like typed state or something?
I thought I double clicked it, but it didn't.
Yeah, try it again. So type case and then just hit return, or case and then hit return, and then double click on state equals quote. I actually do a little shortcut. I hit quote, quote, and then the left arrow because it saves me like a click when I'm typing. It is not case sensitive, so you can type CA in either uppercase or not, because as we'll be learning, very, very few things in FileMaker are actually case sensitive. And I'll put an extra return here. By the way, if you don't have these returns, if it looks like this, it will function the exact same. If you have one typo, then this will say something wrong down here in the result area. So this is a really, as we covered in the beginning class, this data viewer is the most convenient place to write code And so it's a good habit to get into because it tests everything you're doing in a really friendly way. Giving you the result live calculated. It has access to your whole data, and it saves multiple versions of what you're working on as you're doing it. Those are 3 really good benefits. So I'm going to go ahead and punctuate this right. Did you get it working?
Yep.
Okay.
Because I have the test things written but after it.
Oh, okay. So question, why do we use case and not if? And are they different? You guys know I like asking questions that you have no business knowing the answer to. The goal is for you to think and then take a wild guess. I think it's a great way to learn more about FileMaker and its history and its best uses.
Is it because it's pointing to a specific case, not just a random stuff for the table?
No, not in this. That's not what I was looking for in this case. The difference between case and test, that's what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
They really are very similar functions. We talked a little bit in the other class about certain things in FileMaker being newer and becoming a superset, like basically a complete replacement of the older one. This is one of those.
Can I take a wild guess?
What was that?
Can I take a wild guess?
Yes, please.
So, okay. So like a case style is gonna do the booleans like multiple at a time, and then you have your failover, which is like a break, I think. So where if and else is like going through one statement at a time. So
that is exactly
like,
it. You
okay.
totally hit it on the head.
Okay, yeah. So like case is like really good for like doing like days of the week or like schedule type things, and where you have like a set little thing there.
Right. Yeah. Case allows you to very easily add more test and results in one function. Whereas if you use if, you have to nest them. So if you wanted to say something like this, if customer equals, if state equals CA, well, I don't really even want to cover it, but basically, maybe I will. So you could say it like this, if that, then result. So this is exactly the same function, right? So if you look at it this way, that's line for line the same code, except the word case and if are different. They're not calculating right now because I don't have a. But this actually shows you they're both calculating. Oh, I typed the word local wrong, or not lowercase. So the difference is if you want to have more lines, which is exactly what you hit at. Okay. Our first line is state equals California, then local. Otherwise, if state equals, say, Washington, close. Otherwise, distant. Or actually, I like the word remote better. Okay, so that is a 3-line case statement. And if we wanted to write that as an if cannot have this second line like this, right? So the only way that an if works is you actually have to have another if right here. So basically it's like, if this is true, then that. Otherwise, a whole nested if statement. So you have to have a whole thing like this in the middle of this. And so they become really ugly really fast. And this was the only way you could do it when FileMaker came out 30 years ago. So the case statement came along, I don't know, 20 years ago, and they had to leave if in there for compatibility, but it has no value. Don't use it. That's my 2 cents on that. This is going to get really confusing because when we get to scripting, there isn't a case statement in scripting. It's if. So we're going to have sort of 2 things we have to deal with, but scripting and calculations are definitely very different. And so we'll kind of parse that as we get to that. Okay. So let's take this case statement. California, Washington, and neither of those. And then if we monitor it and flip through records, this one says Washington, so it's close. And if I find one that's neither, like Portland, Oregon, that will actually say remote, right? So this is my test. I'm just looking at my eyes down here, or in my case, my eye. I'm going to make a lot of jokes about my condition, so bear with me. Because it's really funny. My wife calls me Lefty. So let's see. So I get those 3 statements down here for local. And so I can see that this is working. Are you guys all following along? Is this all working for you?
Yeah.
Not yet?
No, it is. Well, at least for me.
It does work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Is anyone having an issue with it?
I don't have the 3rd one in yet, but
And you can't share your screen though, right?
no.
Okay. Well, that's okay. We're going to be working on these a lot. Let's even just add a couple more in. Let's add, I'm going to add a 4th line in. I'm going to add Oregon. And one of the things I love about these is how easy they are to modify. State equals OR. I'll call that one local 2. And you can also test for something that's not, right? So for example, another thing that I might want to test for is if there is no state, right? If the state field is null, like it's empty, I can put in the word error. Right, so like if this record for whatever reason doesn't have, I wanted to have a different message. So looking at this, can anybody see an issue why the order would matter in how these tests work? Or can maybe hazard a guess in how these things are calculated, how this sort of functions in FileMaker? Like what if more than one thing is true? For example.
Maybe it, if more than one thing is true, maybe it chooses the first one it encounters or something like that.
That's exactly right. So FileMaker will short circuit, and the first true line, it just shows you that result, and that's that. In this case, it's not actually possible for more than one of these things to be true. Right, so it either equals that, this, or it's empty, or it's none of those things. But we could easily break this by doing something dumb like putting a second line in that says if the city equals Fresno, or even worse, does not equal Fresno. Right, see now it's going to actually make no sense because none of the cities is Fresno. So my calculations is going to be wrong. Oh wait, one of them actually was right. Yeah, this one says local. That's because the first line was testing for local for California. And so that line actually worked. But if it's not California, like this one is null, because I put Fresno as the second line, it never got down to looking to see if there was an error. If I move this line down, that will repair it. Now it'll work like I want. Yeah, now I can see error because there's no state. I might want to say like, you know, data missing or something like that. State missing. It's a better. So it's not. This is a little bit of an odd. You wouldn't really write a calculation necessarily like this one where you have a test against two different fields in something like this. So let's, for now, just for simplicity, get rid of this Fresno line, because this actually is a pretty useful calculation. Now let's actually make this useful by putting it on our layout. Okay, we're going to get to another good topic. We cover them briefly, button bars as calculations. So I'm going to go back into my data viewer. Back into my calculation, and I'm going to copy to the clipboard. We did this too. Copy, or yeah, I'll just use copy, Control C. Then go to my layout mode, and then you guys can follow along. We probably all can't be working on the same customer layout. So each of you guys can go to Manage Layouts and make a copy of this layout for yourself. Let's see. I'll make one right now. I'll click Duplicate. It looks like someone's already done that. That's great. I'll make one for like customer Susan, for example. And then you can go to your layout and play. Each of you. It looks like, yeah, you're all doing great on that. And that way we're not running into each other. I'm going to go to my main one, which I'll call Customer Matt. And I'm going to add a button bar, a one segment button bar. This is another good habit to get into. Button bar tool, draw, delete twice. And now you have a one segment button bar. Click on your pencil and paste, Control V. And now your calculation is there without having to retype anything. And it's already tested. And then we can move this to wherever we want to sort of display our issue. And like where we really might want it is on the additional tab, like right down here next to where state is. So we can kind of get like a little highlight, like a little notifier. And as we flip through records, we can see, oh, this one's missing a state. If I fix it and type in Oregon, it'll say local. If I type in Mississippi, it'll put in remote. If I put in Washington, it will say close because that's a nearby state. Yeah, so we can see if it's working. And I took that math out for Fresno. So if I type it in Fresno, it's not going to do anything anymore, right? Because that's no longer part of my calculation. Can you guys begin to see how this will be useful in your databases?
Yeah.
I find not only is this one, I think, really good for displaying data on layouts like this. I think there's so many places where the calculation dialog shows up, that this becomes really useful. So that's places like calculated fields, conditional formatting, conditional visibility, let's see, hugely important in setting variables and coding when you're writing scripts. So setting variables and setting fields. When you're in search mode, calculations and these functions are really good for security settings. So you can determine whether one user or another user has slightly different access to a given record. For example, I think in our test, in our security, we created a privilege set with a simple calculation. Remember, we went way down this rabbit hole? And we said a user can only see a record if the city is San Francisco or there is no city. And so we have a limited privilege set that only allows that person to look at records in one place. Okay, let's continue with case. And then I'm going to introduce you to let, and we're going to take a little bit of a break and then review things, and then kind of talk a little bit about what you guys want out of these 4 days. I think it's just good to kind of dive into something to really get your brain going first. Okay. The last thing I want to show on case is, it doesn't matter that much, but I think these are easier to read if there's an indent on each line, like so. So it's sort of structured like that. It really doesn't matter. Like I said before, you can punctuate these different ways. I find them easy to read in this way. So this is what I am used to doing and what I like to teach. Let's now take a look at a let function and talk about what it is. I'll do a really brief demo on it, and then we're going to get to it more after the break, and we'll actually all write one together. First, I want to point out that there's something that's repeated a lot in this function, and that's this block of code. Right, so we have this this one area. I'm trying to just select these lines where we're testing for customer equals, customer equals, customer equals. And so there's a lot of repetition in there. So for example, if you're pointing out days of the week or months of the year, or you could have a very, very long calculation, and it just becomes kind of tedious to do that. So a let function allows us to short circuit that. And here's what it does. I'll write a brand new one. Here's how a let function works. Okay, a let function has two halves. I'm going to ignore all that stuff in there because it's really not that useful to do. A let function has a top half and a bottom half. The top half is where you define your variables, definitions, and then the bottom half is where you have your calculation, essentially, right? So I just grabbed that entire case statement on the clipboard. So that's my calculation. And in a let statement, you also have you separate the thing with a semicolon. So I could actually say x equals 1. And that's my entire let statement right there. So on the top half, it can be very, very simple. Like with a case statement, each line can have multiple definition lines. And then at the bottom part, you have your calculation after the semicolon that divides the top and the bottom of the let. So in my brief demo, what I really want to get rid of is I want to get rid of this long thing. So I'm going to cut this whole customer state thing out, and I'm going to define that as X. So X is going to equal the state. And now I can write my calculation much shorter. I can just say if x equals California, Washington, or Oregon. So this actually might be less characters already, even though I've actually wrapped two statements together. And this functions exactly the same as a case statement, but it's easier to read because each of these lines is shorter. I could also call this one like state or S, or I could call it anything that I want. So we're going to all write this together because this is definitely has some other tricky parts to it. And there's another rule for doing multiple lines. But first, we're going to take a 5-minute break, grab some tea, stretch out. And then we'll come back and actually we'll talk a little bit about what you guys want to get. And then we'll really dive into this and work on it together because this is a super important thing. After we do that, we're going to, so let's see that the rest of today is going to be, just so you kind of know, talking more about fields and data modeling, reviewing what you want coming up, getting some pretty good expertise with case and let by putting it into a couple of more tests, and then answering any kind of relationship questions, either relationships in your life or relationships in FileMaker. I always have to go for the humor. And that's our agenda for the day. That's definitely a lot to do. All right, I'll see you guys in 5.
Oh, man.
Before we come back, does anybody have any questions or configuration issues to kind of get going?
I probably will soon.
When you do, I want them. By the way, I'll be posting this video each day to the same YouTube channel that I used for the beginner class. So that way all the videos will just kind of pile on each day.
Which channel was that?
I'll post a link to it in chat. See if I can find it. Okay, I found the link. This should be the right one. That looks like that might be a link to just the first class, not the channel. Let me check that again. It's a playlist is what it is. It's unlisted. Oh, here we go, playlist. I think that should work. I also believe I did not send out the file to people. I don't know if you got it or not, but I definitely will send the file out after this class. Okay. Let's talk about, I'd like each of you guys to talk for just a minute about what you are wanting to get out of this class. We talked about that at the beginning of the beginner one. And I want to make sure that if there's specific things that you really want to learn to do your job, to kind of move along in your career, things about FileMaker that you, or things that you are familiar with in other platforms that you want to know how to do in FileMaker, we've got 4 days. We've got a lot of time to make sure we really cover that stuff. Who wants to go first?
I mean, like I said at the first the first one, the first training. I don't really have anything like that. I'm here because, well, I'm probably gonna work with FileMaker, so I
Yeah.
mean, I just want to learn what I have to work with it. I don't really have any objective or anything like that.
Right. I think for you, learning the scope of all the things that FileMaker can do and what things it does really well and really fast and what things are better to do in a web environment are going to be kind of key.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, Xavier.
I can go next.
Sure.
So as I said from the first one, I'm going to be migrating like FileMaker 3 files to FileMaker 19. So through that process, I want to see if there's any ways that I can find like best practices and optimize stuff. So like this, like calculations and the scripting is going to be really helpful.
Yeah. 3 to 19 is a big jump, but actually we've done that before. It's actually kind of crazy that you can convert a file that's 20 years old like that and it will just work.
Yeah. I know I have to do an intermediary like from 3 to 7.
Yep, you do have to go through a couple different versions. Actually, I think you have to go from 3 to 7 to 11 to 19.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I knew there was some steps in there.
But yeah, there's some steps. But more than that, there's another process that you probably want to do if you can. Mm-hmm. There's a really old program called Metadata Magic, and it cleans up file references. In old versions of FileMaker, file references were invisible, and there was no way to see or edit them, but they were there. So if you, do you already have some databases converted?
No, not yet. I haven't started.
Well, this is one of the things you're going to be seeing is in this window manage. It's called external data sources now. They've changed the name of it. Mm-hmm. When you convert a file, this window is going to be a complete mess.
Yes, I know.
From FileMaker 3 to 19. That'll be the only area that's a real big mess. And there is a best practice that we can talk about offline to get this really clean before you convert. Yeah, that's my one big piece of advice. It's also possible to convert your databases and then make a brand new database and then just import all your data into the new database, copy and paste your layouts.
Yeah.
That might be better depending on how complex.
Some of them are really complex.
Yeah, FileMaker 3 was powerful. I mean, even though that was a long time ago, it could do a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would be happy to talk to you offline about that. I have a lot
fantastic.
of. I go back to well before then, actually. I go back to being really, really excited when 3 came out.
Okay, yeah, that'd be really helpful.
So are you using some new FileMaker stuff now?
As of right now, they don't have anything on 19 that I know of. It's all 3.
So you're using 3 all day then, everyone at the company?
Everyone else is. I'm trying to figure out 19 since that's what I'll be like converting it to.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Actually, on a complex solution, a lot of things actually do just break too. So all the data is there, but some of the functions work differently than they used to. Mm-hmm. So the same exact function just behaves slightly differently. And so, yeah, there's some, I don't know if you've talked to anybody about that yet, but you definitely might have.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, good. It's big. Well, that's exciting though. I think it's going to, the process will take some time, but all the things that people love about 3 are still true of 19.
Yeah.
And so the user
should just be better.
Yeah, way better. Faster, more secure, more control and security, more modern, all kinds of things like PDF and email and things that 3 could not do, you could do now. Yeah, there's so much better. There's nothing that 3 did better than 19, that's for sure.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Who's next?
I can go next.
Okay.
This is Anne. I've used FileMaker intermittently over a 20-year period. I'm just needing a refresher. I've spent the last year and a half kind of trying to get up to speed with 19, but I've never had any formal training with it. So I just kind of want to kind of refresh what I know, maybe remind me of things I forgot.
Okay. Did you develop in it or use it, or what's your main?
You know, in the past jobs, I always created a database to use myself. In the last year, I have created a couple of databases for other people to use. I just still a little nervous about other people using it. So I'm just kind of trying to, I guess, up my skill set.
Yeah, great. This is a perfect class for that. We dove in with something hard too.
Yeah.
Had you used a case statement at all before today?
Yes.
Oh, you have? Okay, good. I'm glad, because that's one that a lot of people avoid. Case and let I dive into because people think they're hard and they're not. You just have to get the key, understand the key parts of it, and then they're great.
Yeah, it was a lot of trial and error and watching videos to try to understand.
Yeah, for sure. Who's next?
I guess that's me.
Okay.
I've been using database for about 2 years, FileMaker for 2 years, and I'm trying to get some reports out of it that are usable, that we can just use like just one button and get them so that other people can understand them with the proper graphics and all that. So
Right.
kind of what I'm hoping to get out.
Okay. What kind of reports?
Well, we're doing reports that show what is going on with our program. They go to different political entities.
Right.
So they have to be kind of pretty high quality reports with a lot of data packed into a little bit of space.
Okay. I think that's going to be a really universal benefit to everybody else as well. Maybe a little bit less to Xavier, maybe not, because actually the reporting aspect and the ability for FileMaker to collate data and display it is very powerful. I would say that FileMaker's main awesome strength is creation of screens to get really good high quality data input. I think that's actually, it's stronger in that area than it is at reporting. And then reporting is right next in line, I think, for strength. And then there's a lot of other things that it can do too, like interacting with other systems, integrating with things like I said, PDF and mail, and also Zapier, Claris Connect, QuickBooks. You can reach out to all the other world of the web with things that it can do. And I think there was supposed to be one other person, but they're not here today, so maybe they'll watch the video and catch up with us. That's good. I believe we're going to be able to cover. Pardon?
I guess I'm next.
Okay. Oh, great. Yes.
My concerns are very similar to Sue's.
Yeah.
So from my background, I'm going to say it this way. I want to do like a nested query, probably with the find and with multiple tables and with like an order, like a sorting, like which you did show us, but with like another calculation in that find for like getting a sum or an average or whatever. So I'm not sure if that like requires scripting or how that works. So it'd be making reports with those multiple tables and with the relationships.
I'm loving the sound of that. So when we get to this, which is going to be really today and tomorrow, can you come up with a really good idea? Like walk us through a sample of what we can maybe play with in our sample data of what kind of report you could build and what kind of a query you want to build. And we'll talk exactly about what things make more sense to script and what things can be done by doing a find and what things can be done by using displaying data on a layout in a report. Because those are all three distinct and they interact. So not putting you on the spot right now, but I would love, actually, Faith, for you and Sue to come up with ideas of specific reports, because you both mentioned that from the data sets that you have. I think it's really good if we can all kind of visualize a specific problem that you have with your data, and then kind of walk through that together. Even if we mock it up with fake
I
data.
actually do have one, but it's not on a FileMaker database. It's on a different one that I've been, like, it was on an Access one. So like basically, I have these fields, which is like the counselors from counselor table, employed from like the employed table client interventions, and then there was return to school from the client table, and so that's sorry, rambling. Return to school from the client interventions table, unemployed from the client interventions table, and then workshop type from the workshop table.
Got it. So like it's a complex join search.
Yes, yes. So I have the I have it on that database, like, and I have the SQL for that, and that's all okay. But I was wondering how that works on FileMaker.
Well, you can actually take a SQL statement like that, and FileMaker has a layer. It's in the advanced class, not the beginning one, that you can actually just use SQL commands against FileMaker internally.
Okay.
So that's one thing. But I think the FileMaker native way to do it is actually much simpler. And we're going to get to that this afternoon. I love that example because it ties in perfectly to the relational model stuff that we're going to get to. But before we do that, let's continue on LET.
Sure.
And then I think we'll dive right into to data modeling, and then building some relationships to drive that kind of report. And then we're going to build a report together to look at that, because that connects to the two other areas that I really want to talk about today, right? So relationships, one-to-many, many-to-many, all that review of that, seeing how they actually rubber hits the road on a report you're trying to build, and then displaying the data on a layout. But not going to get to scripting yet. That'll be coming. But that will tie in. That'll be a perfect segue to scripting for the next couple days. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. And we're going to talk about more aspects of LET. So first of all, let's have everyone write one together from scratch. We'll just do a really, really simple one. And just so you can type it out. Has anyone written a LET statement in class already? In your work?
I have written in JavaScript.
Oh, okay. So it's probably pretty similar, right?
It looks pretty similar, so I'm glad it's familiar.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to follow along. Everyone just open up Data Viewer, type in LET, and hit Enter. And then we'll ignore all this. I really don't find it that useful. If you know how to read it, it kind of tells you what's going on. But yeah, you can see like the first half all the way up to the semicolon. And then the second half is the calculation. So top, bottom, if you will. So first thing we do is delete all that, add a hard return. And let's just define two things. Let's have X equal the city and a Y equal the state. X equals city, return Y equals state. Don't make a typo like I did. And then a semicolon to break the top half from the bottom. And then a simple calculation at the bottom part, which does not actually have to refer to the top part. In other words, it can just be 2 plus 2. So we already see a problem here because it says field missing. And that's because of one critical piece of punctuation that we need, which is a square bracket. So when you have a let statement that has more than one line, I'll delete this one line so we can kind of see what I'm talking about. If I delete that line, now my calculation is valid. But if I add it back, it won't let it work because I don't have a square bracket here and here. So when you have in your top half of your let statement, there's one other punctuation that's required, and that is a square bracket at the to define the entire top half, basically. I'll let you guys catch up and see if you can type all that. And then we'll keep playing and actually make this more meaningful. And kind of play with add more lines, and we can see, you know, how to put this into practice. Maybe we'll even take a look at some of the other examples of ones I've written that I've stored. So I'll add another line here, Z equals zip code. So why would I use single letters? Does that make sense to you, or do you think there's a better way to do it? Anyone have an idea on that?
I think maybe using like readable words would be better. I don't know.
You are 100% correct. You can use words like city, state, and zip. And that does make it simpler. And then when you have your second half of your statement down here, like case city equals San Francisco, and state does not equal California, error, right? So something like that can be in your case statement. And then have a failover line. Oh yeah, one other thing we need is I have to close. So when I have so the let statement has an open parentheses and a closed parentheses. And the case statement has an open parentheses and a closed parentheses. So you just have to be careful about that when you write them. And I almost always write a let statement with a case statement in the bottom. And I do that because it's just really convenient to edit it, work with it, change it, modify it. Yeah, here's a good example. This one I didn't use friendly ones. Well, a little bit. Hour, day, and timestamp of the current timestamp. And then a case statement that tests for different things. And one of the other things that we see here is when I define each line, H is hours, I can define it, I can modify the line on each successive line down. Oh, this can't be found. Let me cancel that. Let's go back to this one. So in other words, I can say city equals the city, but then I can say city equals the left one word of the city or something like that. Left words of city, 1. Right, so as it procedurally goes through from top to bottom, and it allows me to sort of clean it and test it line by line, which is really nice. While I'm throwing out things, there's a no man's land here in the middle So after the semicolon, after the top half, and before the bottom half, this little no man's land in the middle, I sometimes use to what I call sample data. So I can grab a bit of what I've defined, one of my variables I've defined, like zip, right there. And then what I'll do is I'll put it in zip, and then I'll put a hard return. And so when I'm looking at my result, I can get data from my top part before it actually does the bottom part. And then I can test to see if I'm getting what I want in my calculation. It makes it much easier to write your calculation. Right, so there's my state. Right, so if I take my city, this is Fresno. So if I go through records, yeah, Santa Fe Springs, that's just going to be Santa, right? Because it takes the first word. This maybe isn't a good example of how you'd use this. A better example is this. In a database, sometimes you'll have things like people entering spaces or putting returns in after, as they type data, they'll put like San Francisco with a space at the beginning and a space at the end. It's not right, but it's the real world. So you might have a record that looks like it's supposed to be in San Francisco, but it's not because it's actually spaced San Francisco. So something that I can do is not leftwards, but actually there's another function called trim. And trim gets rid of all the trailing and leading spaces from a field. So now this actually looks like it really is San Francisco because the city is San Francisco. If I delete this line, it's not San Francisco anymore. It actually should say error. That's interesting. Yeah, because on this record, the city is not San Francisco. It's actually San Francisco space, so it's working anyway for some reason. That's never good. Oh, you know what? My calculation is wrong. Oh, that's right. Estate is not California. Error. Let's just simplify this bottom part. Okay, so if city exactly equals San Francisco, then put in home sweet home. Right. And the city does not equal San Francisco because it equals San Francisco space. But this one does because this record doesn't have leading and trailing spaces. So if I went back to this record and I added back that line of code, now it's going to work correctly because I'm cleaning my data in my calculation instead of cleaning my data in the database. It's generally better to clean your data in your database, but okay, I've kind of bopped around a bit. Who wants to share their progress on how they're doing with your LUT function? And also, I would encourage you to just try different things. Come up with your own ideas of how you actually really want to look at the data and how you want to clean it and parse it and you know, learn this function, learn defining your variables and how you want to name them, learn how you want to use case statements and whatever kind of stuff you want to do at the bottom, and maybe do or maybe don't test the sampling part in the middle. Any takers? Xavier, I know you're dying to show us your stuff.
Yeah, I can, but I pretty much copy what you've done, so.
Okay. I still want to see.
Sure.
Yeah, great. And so you can see your calculation working there at the bottom. It says home sweet home. Did you also go into, yeah, you have your trim function. Did you mess with your data by putting in trailing spaces to test that?
Yeah.
Great. Notice, by the way, when you click into San Francisco, go in your field, hit return, the return character, enter. It goes to the next field. So I'll take a slight aside because this connects to a data quality issue. Go to layout mode for a second. We'll be a little nonlinear, give your brains a chance to parse things. So you're on your layout. Click on the city field. And then over on those 4 tabs on the right that we talked about in beginner, you're on the correct one, the data tab, the rightmost one. And down around the middle, there's an area that says go to next when, and you can see there's tab, return, and enter. Uncheck return, and then go back to browse mode. And now if you click to the additional and you go to San Francisco and you hit a return, it'll allow you to actually store a hard return character. You want that for a notes field. You maybe want that for an address field like the first line above that. You for sure do not want that in a city field. So I wanted to just talk about this as a way to just show it. So go back in there and put in those returns again. And then go to layout mode, fix your error by clicking on city and then rechecking that box. And then notice that when you go back into the field, they're still there. Oh, did you delete them? When you click into the field, they should actually show up still. I don't see them though. That's interesting. And I thought you did leave them too. I'm going to connect to another nice lesson on this. I like being nonlinear. Okay. Directly related to this is something that's going to connect to searching that we're going to be doing later. How do you find fields, data in your database, that there's a hard return in there that there should not be? Anyone know?
No.
So go to find mode. Control F, and in the city field, type in space, quote, space, quote. You want a space in the middle between the quotes, and then hit enter. Or click perform find at the top. That does a find for all of the records that contain a space, which may or may not be leading. So flip through your records. And you might find a record that's like a city, I don't know, like I'm trying to think of ones that should not have a space, for example. Do your find again. Hit Control R. So you just hit find, by the way. Control R re-triggers your same previous find. But once you do find, you can't do that again anymore. Okay, I put in some bad data. Click into the gray area and then just hit enter. That's the same as clicking the perform find button. Now notice that this record actually comes up and there's a space and there shouldn't be because it's not a 2-word city name. So this goes under data cleaning and advanced querying. Click on that record on Pleasanton and delete the space. And then go to the next record. Oh, Carly's modifying it. Oh, in this class, whenever you see the error like that, click that again to edit it. Add a space back. Looks like Carly's out now.
Yeah, I did.
Anytime you see an error that one of the other students is in there, click send message and type something nasty and funny. Like, get the hell out of my record. What the hell are you doing? Something like that. It makes life really fun. And the best thing about it is the other user can't respond. And so it's really deliciously passive aggressive and funny. And everyone knows it's funny, so it's all good. Okay, go to the next record down. And that one looks correct. Okay, so now let's get to the other part of the lesson. Who has that idea how to search for a return character? Because we already know you can't click into the field and hit return. Anyone got a guess? I just came up with an idea that I wanted to try, but I bet it won't work. Oh yeah, it's not even the list. Okay, here's how you do it. It's odd, but here's how you do it. Go into contracted work, the field down at the bottom, and hit a return there. Oh, it didn't let you do it, did it? Yeah, it wouldn't, because when you're in find mode, the return character really wants to put a return in. Go to browse mode again. And here's a multi-step way of doing this. In your contracted work field at the bottom, under trimming, click into the field by the word trimming at the very bottom. Yeah, scroll all the way down there to actually way down, and just hit a return right at the bottom there. Now, double click on your return characters to select it, and then copy that to the clipboard. Control C. Did that work? Yep, it did. Okay, so it's very subtle. Do that again. Go to Control F again. And this time click into the city field. And then look very carefully before you hit, so notice what you just hit paste a little quickly. Before you were in there, the cursor was at the top line. And when you put in your return, it invisibly shows you a return character. Now, I bet you would think that this would work to find a return character. So go ahead and click Perform Find and see what happens. In the top. Okay, it doesn't work because it requires one extra thing. Go back to Find again and go really slow here. Type 2 quote characters, quote, quote. Go between them and now hit paste. And now this looks odd, but this is a return character in between 2 quotes. And this will work for a lot of different types of things that you're searching. But this is the trick for finding text in your database that contains a return. Now click Perform Find and it will work. And there's your record, your one record that's broken. And if you clean it by getting rid of those returns, and then now hit Control R, that re-triggers your same find, and now hit Perform Find again. No records match because it's now clean. Pretty cool, right? I just broke a few more records so that you guys can all play with this. So now there's 5 or 6 ones with returns so that you can all kind of replicate those steps. That's sort of a little piece of candy. But it's definitely something that you're going to find useful, and it connects to one of the other things FileMaker is amazing at, which is doing really tricky finds like that.
I have some questions for the data viewer. This here.
Yeah.
So this character, what exactly does it do? I'm not sure.
That is a Pilcrow character. It's a hard return.
Okay. All right. Okay.
That's actually very similar to the other things that we're looking at, except you can't search for that way. But when you're doing coding, when you're in the calculation, and you see your list of operators, that's that really small column right there. Yeah. So the Pilcrow is one of them, and it basically just creates a hard return like a line space in between to join things together.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit special. Like the other ones are all math operators, right? Equal, not equal, greater than, less than, addition, subtraction, logic functions like and, or, not. And the very last one is the square of. So you can do a power on the very bottom there.
And for the ones like the doesn't equal or the greater than or equal, is there a way to write them out, or do you always have to click on them?
There is a way to write them out. On the Mac, there's a keyboard shortcut. It's just Option greater than for greater than or equal to. I don't know what the shortcut is on Windows, but one of the other things you can do is you can actually just use 2 characters in a row. You can type a greater than and an equal next to each other. Go ahead and type it. Like that. That's actually going to be a greater than equal to.
Okay. And for the equal to, is it
not equals, you mean?
Yeah, doesn't equal, yeah.
Yeah, doesn't equal is less than greater than together. Like that.
And is it considered like bad practice to use those, or should I use these ones, or?
You know, I don't think I would file that under bad practice. I think it operates exactly the same, so I think I'm agnostic about it.
Okay.
Now notice that your calculation won't work right now because anyway. Yeah. You can just hit cancel too to not save it.
Okay, good. That's it.
Okay, we've been a little bit nonlinear. Before we go to the next area, how are you guys feeling about let? Who has an idea of how we can actually write a let function for something a little bit more meaningful in the database before we go on to the next area, which is going to be more data modeling and reporting? And by the way, we're going to for sure come back to case and let several times in the next couple days. So this is not like it's your only time to ask. Anyone? By the way, do you go by Xavier or Xavier?
Whatever, I really don't mind.
Oh, it's probably is it
well, in French it's Xavier, but you
okay,
can.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought.
Yeah.
I don't speak any or much French.
Yeah, you can say Xavier, Xavier, whatever.
Yeah, Xavier. Yeah. It's a cool damn name. There's not enough people called that.
Thank you.
Any name that starts with an interesting letter of the alphabet, you know. Unlike Matt. Okay. What are the votes? Do you guys want to press on with data modeling and more advanced reporting, or nerd out a little bit more on let before we continue? Need votes.
I mean, whatever. Well, I think I'm fine with let, but if
I say
you say what?
Moving on's fine.
Okay. That's kind of the vibe I was getting too. And I think by saying that we're going to come back to lead a couple more times. Makes it kind of an easy choice. Okay, let's, it's not quite time for a break. It's close though. Let's come up with an idea of a problem to solve together that will involve these two things using our sample data that we have. And I can maybe import some other data real quick too. I want to try to come up with a report that looks at the related structure of our current sample data, where we have quotes and work orders, addresses, city, state, zips, and some customers. To try to get a complex query that only shows customers if a certain thing is true. Like, for example, show me a report of all customers in California that have placed an order in the last 90 days. And also don't have any quotes outstanding or something like that, you know. So give me some ideas of like that, of what you would want to do. And then query that data and display that data. Like in your actual work, and then we'll just try to map that onto the data that we have in this database. Does that make sense? Who has ideas on that? I know you guys have ideas on it. I can wait all day. There was some pretty good examples you guys were talking about when we went around. And I'd love to learn more about that. Susan, can you tell me more about it?
Oops, I was muted. About the kind of data to looking for?
Yeah, like what's a real world report that you run?
One that I run is the quantity of homes that are, because we work with homes that individuals with disabilities live in. So the quantity of homes in a given area that are open, and how many individuals can live in each home, what the capacity for the home is.
Yeah, so in your case, you're talking about like retirement communities, right?
Okay, we can go
back. Or is
back.
it individual homes you're talking about?
They're individual homes. We have They have foster homes that will have anywhere from 1 to 5 people in them.
Okay. Okay, so then what kind of queries are you looking for? So you have like you must have a table that has one record per address.
Yes.
And then like a portal of all the people living there, or like a single number field of the number of people living there? How's it structured?
We have a number field that shows the capacity of people that home can have in it, because they're all lists for different numbers.
Capacity, great. So you're like comparing target to actual kind of a thing, huh?
Yes.
Okay, I like that. And then tell me more. So then you're so like a home is supposed to have, it's rated at 3 people to be safe or something like that. And then how is the data structured to show how many people do live there?
Then there is another field that where we put how many people we have seen in the home, or how many people the owners have verified are in the home with our conversations with them. Every so often we'll find where they have too many people in them, but more frequently they will not have up to their full license capacity.
Oh, I see. So it's either going to be under, on, or over kind of a thing, right?
Right.
Okay. I'm asking leading questions for case statements too. Okay, so you'd have like at least two fields then to track that.
Mhm.
And then do you also have a list of the names of the people who live there, something like that?
We do, but we don't track by the names because of confidentiality for the individuals. Plus, they move around a lot.
Okay.
So while one person might live at this home, in 2 weeks, they're going to live in maybe another home or maybe two other homes. Sometimes they move pretty fast. So
Right.
we track the names. One thing we do track is the legislative district they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of the communications do go to the legislators if there are specific things in their district that are impacting the care needs or the rights of the individuals that are in there, their constituents.
Okay. Okay. I'm trying to obviously the data that we have doesn't have fields exactly like that, but I think we can come up with some analogs that will get us some ability to kind of play with it. And it's a really good exercise in thinking about the relational parts of it for counting, and then checking compared to like a quota, if you will. So let me share screen. Okay, so here's the training environment. So we've got data already, like how many work orders do you have? But let's say that we wanted a field in here like, let's call it like order quota. Like how many orders, what's the target number of orders we want for this customer? And like in your case, how many people is this, could be safely living in this home?
Right.
Right. So I'll create a field. So I go to manage database. I always use keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-D, and I'll call it target quota. And it'll be what type of field? Text, number, date, timestamp?
That one maybe would be a number.
It would. Create. I always like to put a comment. Min number. When you create a field, it's a good idea to use the comment to describe what it is you're talking about. It definitely makes life better, because a year from now, you're not going to remember what that field was for. And it'll be really useful to have that for yourself. All programming, as you work with FileMaker, the most important person is your future self. You should make your life simple for your future self as you encounter your own work down the road. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's one of my mantras. Okay, so on the additional tab, I'll stick this field. Oh, that's got a lot of stuff going on. I think I'll put it on the orders tab down at the bottom. I'll just duplicate this field and I'll grab target quota down here. And and I want to populate my data with some random numbers so that I can play with it a little bit. So here's another nonlinear thing and another really good FileMaker thing. There's a function called the replace command. And it's replace field contents, Control equals. Who's used this before?
No.
No. This is like the copy down command in Excel.
Oh.
And it's very scary, but very powerful. So what this will do is I can have data in here like 1, 2, 3, you know, to, well, not Q, because that's the next key over. And then I can use the index, the insert from index, to kind of see what's in there. We looked at that already. But what I want to do is I just want to populate my data with fake stuff. So I'm going to use replace control equals. And it's going to permanently overwrite the data in my target quota field with, and I'm going to use a function. And I really should write this in data viewer, but I'm not going to because I'm lazy. I'm going to use the random function. The random function is will show you, you know what, I am gonna go back to this. Data viewer, I'm gonna not be lazy. Here's what random is. It's a random number between 0 and 1. And every time it recalculates, every time you flip a record, it recalculates a new number. So if I want a random number between 1 and 100, I do this. I grab a middle of the random function, starting at the third character in and 2 characters long. That will give me a random number between 0 and 1 and 99. So I'll copy that to the clipboard. That's a nested function, you know, middle and random together. And very, very simple math. And then I'll go down here, I'll do replace, which is control equals, replace with calculation, paste my tested calculation. By the way, I actually don't want this to be 0. So I want it to be +3. I want the smallest number to be 2 or 3. Yeah, so 0 plus 3 would be 3, or at +1 or whatever. So you can kind of do different things with this. I can also multiply it by 2 or multiply it by 0.5 if I want it to be a number between 1 and 50. So there's all kinds of tricky things you can do. But I like really having good sample data. And now when I look at my database and do insert, I'll have a good random sampling of data, which is what I want for this next part. Okay. So we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to construct a query and build a report that compares the actual orders placed, like this one has many, with the number of orders that are supposed to have been placed. I put it on the wrong. This needs to go on the first tab. Oh, I copied the wrong thing for sure. Oh, I grabbed the wrong thing before, so I'll just duplicate this. By the way, creating the field was something that I don't know if you guys went and did that. So as we work through class, creating a field's only one person needs to do, but all of you should be playing along on your copy of the layout. So now when I go to the work orders, I'll be able to see how many there are and how many there are supposed to be. That's kind of what I want to get to. Yeah, like this one's supposed to have 66 and there are none. Maybe I'll lower their quota, you know. And we'll play with how we want that to look. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break and come up with more ideas. Just throw stuff at me of how you want this report to look from your work, even though obviously it's borrowing from things like tracking housing information, and our data is orders. But yeah, I really find that useful to come up with real world ideas of what you're trying to do. All right, I'll be back in a couple. All right. You guys have ideas of what you want to build? You're too quiet today, people. I'm fine to plow on, but it's more fun when you make interesting challenges for me and for everyone. Let's see. I want to move these fields over to the right a little bit. So, and I'm also going to change my default tab to work orders. So when I go back and forth, it always goes there. Right now, I can easily search on all of the ones. Let's try a couple simple queries to sort of play with this. I can do a search in my field of all of the customers with a target quota of greater than, say, 10 orders, using greater than 10. And that's 43 of the 49 have a number greater than 10. That's kind of unrealistic for my sample data. So I'm going to further sculpt this. Call it target quota divided by 2. But I'm going to round it off to 0 decimal places. Now I'll do that find again. Now I have 38. That's kind of good. So I can easily search on like how many ones have exactly 3? None. How many exactly 10? 1. So there's one that has the target quota of precisely 10 orders. What's more useful is trying to find them in ranges. Like how many of them are over 40? 11, right? So we've got, this is kind of a good way to kind of do it. But what I don't have is the comparison. And I also don't have the actual count. So I can find over here, if I search on work orders with some number of hours, like the hours is greater than 0, that will find that I have 45 records with work orders, and presumably these other 5 don't have any, which is great. That works out well. And then I can also show you a way to do a search that's a not true search, right? So I can find work orders greater than 10, right? We already did that one. And that gives me 38. But I can also say, show me all the ones that are greater than 10, but omit them. And that in a single request, and it flips it on its head, does the opposite. And that becomes 11, where the number is not greater than 10, which means it's less than or equal to 10. So if I said less than or equal to 10, less than or equal to 10, and type the correct character, I get my same 11 records. So sometimes that's not that useful. When it really is useful is this. Find all the ones that have a quota greater than 10, new request, that don't have any hours. Hours are greater than 0, omit. Everybody following me on that? So this is a hybrid, this is a two-part search request. And it's part one, find all the ones that match this criteria, but limit my set to only show me ones that also are missing hours. So hours greater than 0, omit, which means there are no hours. I don't know if I said that right, but let's see what we get when we run it. So this finds the 2 records that don't have hours, but do have a quota greater than 10. Who could think of another way to do that same query? No takers? I'm trying to think of ideas myself. I think you could do it in one request. Let me try. If I try greater than 10 and equals, now equals is interesting because equals does not work the same in a related field compared to a local field. So in other words, the equals character in a search doesn't necessarily work the way you think it will when you're in a portal. It did not find any records, right? So we know that there are records that have no hours that have a quota because we just did that. So here's all the ones with a quota greater than 10. Let's just try a search for nothing in here. It does not work, right? So that's our first clue that something is wrong. If we say search for ones where this is greater than 0 and omit it, we can clearly see that there's 4 records with no hours. But if I go in here and I say search for equals, it does not work. I think that's just something to be aware of. If, on the other hand, I go in here and I search for equals, well, in this case, I don't think I actually have any records with nothing in the quota. Let's create some. Okay, so now I have 3 records in here with nothing in the quota. So now if I search for equals, I'll find them because that's stored in a local field. Okay, so that's one part of this is showing you guys some kind of complex queries. Part 2 is I want to get to a comparison. I want to know the count of the total work orders and the quota of the work orders to compare them. To do that, I need a field, and I need a calculated field. And so this is a review. So I've got my target quota, and then I need another one called work order count, which will be what type? Anyone know what field type?
A number?
Yes, except it's actually a special kind of a number. It's a calculation number. If I just make it a number field, I'll have to actually populate it somehow. But I can use a special type of a number, which is a calculation. And that's still a number field, but it uses a count function. And it counts through C work orders. And this is review as well. It counts the primary key, the work order number field. It's kind of weird to count an ID field, but that's how this works. And here's how that will look when I show it. By the way, I could have written that function in Data Viewer, But for simple things like this, I usually just go straight to do it. Okay, wow, that's 100 orders. Here you go. So now I have my two fields that I want to show. And I can see, oh yeah, no quota, work order count. And now we're going to get to the next part. Now we're going to create the report. This next part would be much more fun to walk someone through creating it now that we have the building blocks. And we're going to create a report with these two fields that are now existing. And I'm going to show you some techniques for kind of picking up where we left off in beginner class, for displaying and sorting the data different ways using, maybe even if we have time, case and let. Who wants to drive and build that? It'll be similar to the report we already built. It'll be similar to this report. Why do you guys not want to volunteer?
I'll do it.
Great, thanks. Great, so I see you've got the fields on there. So I will walk you through this, and then everyone else can follow along as well. And basically by all making your own report. Let's see. So what this report is going to be, let's think about it for a second together. It's going to be a list of all of the customers, and it's going to show these two numbers on it. And then we're going to use a different widget, which is not a calculated field, on the report once we're done, to show whether the customer is above or below quota. So here's how we do it. We go to layout mode.
I can't see anything.
I should be sharing.
I'm seeing it, so I'm not sure what's going on. Do you think there's a hidden window maybe? Yeah.
Don't know. I don't know.
Were you seeing it when I was sharing?
Yes.
Let me take back over again and see what happens. You see mine now?
Yep.
Let me stop sharing. Try it again and see if you can share. There
we go.
Okay, great. Okay, so in layout mode, which is where we are now, click New Layout Report at the top. And then we're going to use a little, we're going to use the widget to make it. So call this one, oh yeah, and since each of you guys will be making a report, put your name on it. Call it, I don't know, just report Xavier for now. And then click on computer. And then you really have a couple of choices here. In this case, let's just use list. We don't really need it to have sub summaries yet. So we're just going to make it a simple list report. And it's blank. So not a lot on there. And that's okay. To add our fields to the report, there's in the very, very top right corner, your screens might look different. Next to manage, there's those two buttons that turn on the pane to the left and to the right. Click the left one. There, you did it. That shows you the column on the far left there, which shows you fields, objects, and add-ons. And what we want is we want to add 3 fields to this report. Before we start adding them, though, we have some drag preferences down at the bottom. And we're going to click on the field placement. We're going to stack the fields that way. Yeah, the second one, horizontally, not vertically. And we're going to make a label on top of the field, not to the left of the field. That's the second of the 4. And that's it right there. Okay. Scroll up and find the field called customer, and then drag it out to the body area. Grab the one called, and then scroll all the way to the bottom of the list there. We'll clean it up later. Yeah, at the bottom, there's 2 fields called target quota and work order count. Click one and then shift click the other one. And then you can drag them both out together. Okay, this part isn't super obvious, but the blue area, which is the top navigation, yeah, you've got this totally going on, has to have the headers in it. You have to move all of them up a little bit more because the headers have to be entirely in that area. Yeah, that's a lot of space below them, but that's fine. Also, the fields have to be entirely inside the body. To nudge things around, you can use the arrow keys. After you select them, you can use arrow up and down to move them 1 pixel at a time. And rather than shift clicking them, you can drag a box around them to select a group. So that's the way I usually work with layouts. Okay, your footer is really large, so make the footer shorter. And now you're going to have our basic report right here. So if you switch to browse mode, we're golden. Okay, question. Can we use find mode here on this report to search for data like we could in the other mode? And you kind of already answered it, didn't you?
Yeah.
Which is yes, you can. So yeah, there's some caveats to that. If you have a sub summary or a grand summary, you cannot search data in that. But anytime you have a body, which is what we have on this one because it's showing us each line is 1 record, then we can search on body. So the 2 fields that we have on there, one of them is a calculated count of actual data, and the other one is an overridable stored quota. And so if we said, show me all the records with a quota between, say, 20 and 40, here's how we do that. We go to target quota and we type in 20, ... 40. In all number fields and date fields, 2 or 3 dots in between numbers or dates gives you a range. And go ahead and hit enter, and that's the list right there. Sort them, hit Control S, and quote them, and double click on the target quota. And then notice that the target quota has an icon on it, which is ascending. Over on the right, if you click it once, in the bottom center there, it's ascending, descending, and custom. Click on descending, and then click sort. That's how you do a manual sort. We're going to get to sorting more in scripting. And so that now we have them sorted by our target quota. And so we've already got some utility here. But you know what we don't have? We don't have any indicator if they're over or under quota. Let's write that code. Let's follow a best practice and write it in Data Viewer. So Tools, Data Viewer, click on plus, and let's go for broke and write it as a let statement. Type let and hit enter. Hit the enter and go to the next line. And then we're going to define 2 variables. Type the word target equals, and then scroll down to the bottom of the field list and then choose target quota. And then add a space semicolon return. And then actual equals. And then choose work order count at the bottom. You can also actually type ahead, but notice that. So you just actually did something really good. So it's actually called work order count. So if you type in workspace order space COU,
sorry,
it's a little tricky when you start typing other characters. It loses your type ahead, but there it is, and you can just hit enter. I actually kind of prefer clicking it from the list. Yeah. So one thing's already broken from our let, which is the square brackets. So square bracket there, that's a curly, there you go. And then add a few more hard returns before that. Let's see, before the very, very last parentheses. Add several of them. Okay. Now we're going to write our case statement. So type case and hit enter. Just enter it to go to the next line. And now we're going to say if target is less than actual, so just type target, less than sign actual. Space, semicolon, space. And then on the same line, in just the word under in quotes. And then semicolon. And then the next line, target is greater than actual. Over. Okay. Who sees what's wrong with this? There are some very subtle punctuation problems that I'd like us to all try to tune to a little bit to figure out why it's not showing us any result down at the bottom, which it should be doing. Oh, yeah, well, that's one thing.
Should there be a colon after the bracket in the middle?
Yes, a semicolon right after the square bracket. What else? I hope you guys don't think it's mean that I let people type code and see problems that don't stop you right away. But there's things that you shouldn't know yet.
Yeah, a good way to learn.
And one of them is that on the last line of a let and on the last line of a case, you don't need that extra semicolon. So I think if you get rid of those two, I think that's it. Yep, that's it. That was the last bit of thing. So sometimes it'll let you do it. In fact, I think if you put one at the bottom of the case, it's still valid. But it's not valid if you put it at the top of the let, because it's saying, oh, there has to be something else down there, and there's not anything else down there. So as a best practice, don't put them in on your last line, even though it allows you to. Okay. Go ahead and copy this code to the clipboard. How do we put it on our layout? And click monitor after you've copied it. Give me 2 or 3 ways that we can take the code that you just wrote and display it on the report.
Create another field and put that calculation in it.
That's a classic way and is a good one. There's pros and cons to that approach. Anytime you make a calculated field, it takes up a little bit of space in the database. It's it's stored at the structural level. And if you only ever need it for one report, it's not an ideal way, but that is absolutely the way that it has been done for most of time.
Can you do a button?
A button? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Oh, I love you. That is the preferred way. That is the modern way. And it's the button bar tool is a layout calculation. And you perfectly took the bait that I was setting up. Okay, so draw a button right on the layout right there. And then the other habit you're going to get into is making these and then hitting delete twice. And then click on the pencil and paste. And then click OK. And go to browse mode. Now you see over and under. So one thing pardon?
That's mind blowing.
It's cool, right?
Yes.
Now, there's one thing that you cannot do when you use a layout calculation like this with a button calculation, and that is you cannot search on it. So in other words, you cannot search on over or under because that's a button and you cannot click into it. So remember I said a second ago, there's pros and cons to using the field method. The field method allows you to search on it and sort on it. So this button method is nice because it doesn't take up any structure. You can make multiple copies of it. You can modify it without getting into the schema, because anytime you get into the schema, it potentially locks the entire database for all the users using it. But if you're only working on a layout, it never locks the database. So there's some subtle things like that.
The structure, if you put it in a field, that's slowing it down?
No, it doesn't really slow it down. Yeah, so a calculated field, especially if it's an unstored calculation, which means it's not indexed, and this one would be unindexed because it refers to related data. So any calculation that adds up data from a portal can never be stored, which means it will never be super, super fast. It's always going to be a little bit slower. But it also means it doesn't take up any space in the file. So mostly, I think that they just have a psychic cost, because every time you want to do some custom report for one little thing, if you make a calculated field, you're not being kind to your future self, because you're not going to know what you wanted for that. You're not going to remember why you made it 3 years from now. But if you make it on a layout and you use a button tool like we just did, then all of the code is in one place. You don't have to remember why it was there, and you don't have to think about it in all the other places you could potentially use it, because it's only here. By the way, the work order count, which is a calculation, we could have done that the same way. And then in our calculation that we just wrote, we could actually just have that function to count the work orders. So we did for sure have to make a target quota field, because that's just a regular old stored number field. But the other two fields we could have just made as calculations on the layout. So the button bar is a layout calculation. Okay, what else do I hate about this? I hate that it's blue and button looking. Let's see if we can change it. So go to layout mode and click on the button. And then we're going to look at themes and styles. So over on the right, on that far rightmost pane, you have 4 icons at the top. The leftmost one is all of your basic measurements, position information. And the next 2 over are the ones we're going to play with. Click on styles. And those are all the styles that already exist in the theme. Click on them one at a time. And then you'll see how the look changes of that widget, and see if any of them are right. Ooh, Transparent footer navigation looked close. What about transparent left? Yeah, that's even better. Okay, go to browse mode. And now that kind of matches our style better. So even though it is a button, well, could be a button, we actually didn't assign any function to it. So if you try to click on the word under there or over, it doesn't do anything, because even though we're using a button widget, we didn't tell the button to do anything when you click it. So it's basically functioning just as a layout calculation, like I said a second ago. So this gives us some really nice ability to do things, and we can actually then put some other calculations on there for other type of meaningful report data that we might want to look at. Let's do that. Let's go to layout mode and duplicate your button just by control dragging it to the right a little bit. Double click on the copy, and we're going to write a very simple calculation. So click on the pencil. And we're not going to use a case or a let here. All I really want to know is some of my customers have a really, really high target. Actually, what I really want to know is if they actually have a lot of orders. If they actually have more than twice as many orders as the quota, then I want a special, like an exclamation point or something like that. Okay, so here's our math. The two fields we have down at the bottom are target quota and work order and order count. So if work order count, double click on work order count times 2. So put in no, just sorry. Use times 2 like that. Is greater than, so greater than sign, the quota, the target quota field. Double click. So basically, this already is. I'm trying to think if we actually need this in a case statement. Yeah, we do. So you actually have to type case before the beginning of this. Some places in FileMaker, you can actually write a calculation, and you don't have to put a case test in. No, you're good. You should just delete that. All right. I would have just deleted the parentheses and then added it to the end. Yeah. Okay, so you need you have the test, but not the result. So just before that last parentheses, put a semicolon. And then the word amazing. So there's a very simple calculation. If the work order count times 2 is greater than the quota, which means they've more than doubled their quota, they're amazing. Okay, so click OK. And that's our calculation. And then move that over next to the other one. And then go to browse mode. As you guys replicate this, try different things, try different ideas, explore your creativity. Wow, that's quite a few. That's a lot more amazing ones than I thought. Let's change our quota to 4 times. Wait, I don't think it's working. It doesn't appear to be working. Go back to browse mode. So we've got a couple of problems here. Take a look at Van Buren Bridges. Their target's 48 and their actual 6. They're not over. Look at the line above that one. Palm Lake Center. Their target's 43. Their actual's 34. They're not over either. So I think our math is reversed on the first button. One of the things that I really like to show and teach, I like to make errors because a key skill to gain is how to diagnose, find, and fix them. So like at a glance, I think both of our two fields have have small errors in them. It looks like our over-under field is reversed. So there's two possible problems. One of them is that the fields on the layout are actually backwards and target and actual are wrong. And the other one is that our math is backwards in our function. Let's go look at both of those things. So go to layout mode. By the way, if somebody else wants to take over, I don't need to pick on one person this whole time. Okay, I can already see the answer to my first question, which was, are the fields correct? So target, quota, and work order count are the correct fields. The label above the field matches the field. To make the layout a little bit simpler, where it says target quota, just click on the word target quota, the layout, the label, and then just type target. And on the other one, type actual. Duplicate that text by control dragging it. And over the calculation, the first one, put in score, which we'll maybe play with as we go. And then go to browse mode and see how this looks. Okay, let's take a look at our calculation and diagnose it a little bit. So go to layout mode and double click on that first one and click on the pencil. Yeah, I think when I told you, when I was dictating the code to you, I totally told you incorrectly. So if you reverse those two signs, go back into that math for a second. What's one thing that we have not accounted for? Anyone have an idea?
If it's equal?
Yes, if it's equal. How do we fix it?
Greater than or equal.
That's the way.
Or equal.
On one or both?
Both. One's greater than and equal, the other one's less than or equal.
If you do both of them greater than or equal and less than or equal.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It actually could be possible for them both to be true.
Yeah.
Except FileMaker, it'll actually work because if the first one is true, it's going to stop right then and say it's under. I would submit that we would put the equal sign on the lower one. If you're under, it's not equal. So in other words, if your target is 10 and you sold 10, you're not under. The other option is to add a third line, which says target equals actual. So let's add that while we're here. So put another semicolon, add another line, target equals actual. And we'll use spot on or exact or whatever you want to do. It can be English. Does it matter the order that you do those three tests in? So we're first looking for over, then we're looking for under, then we're looking for exactly. And like in any aspect of FileMaker, do you think it matters how we do those tests?
Maybe.
Maybe is the correct answer. So there's two aspects that I'd like you to think about. One, in this case, we're actually not doing this, but if we said, let's say that we were looking at a hard number like 20 over, 10 over, 5 over, 5 under, 20 under, etc. if we're actually looking at a test like that, you have to sort of do them sequentially. Because multiple statements are going to be true. In other words, if we said, if the target is over the actual, sorry, if the actual is like way above quota by 3 times, the target is also over the quota by 2 times and 1 time. And so you have to think about that in your logic. In this case, we're actually just doing 3 very like Boolean results. They're true. Each of those lines is automatically excludes the other 2 lines. But it would be possible to write a function that the other line does not exclude the other 2 lines. Like if the target orders, if the actual orders are greater than 50, if the actual orders are greater than 20, if the actual are greater than 5, something like that. Okay. Secondly, and more subtle, FileMaker will exit when it gets the first true statement. And so if if we're writing a long case statement, and there's one of the lines of code is really seldom hit in the actual world in your data, it's going to negatively perform. It's going to be slower if you put that one at the top. Because you're basically saying, if this test is true, which is almost never true, then do this thing. Because it has to evaluate it for every single record. It usually doesn't come into play, but it will as you get more advanced with your development. So that's one of the other things to think about is how your data distribution actually falls. And so you can put your tests in order of the most frequent occurrence in your data. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So go ahead and click OK, because I think you've done with this one. By the way, if you guys are following along and you're vexed at something, you can just go to Xavier's layout and copy his code, because his code's on his, not mine right now. So you can just go there and grab the button and copy it, and then play with it, modify it, amend it. Okay, let's go back to browse mode and see if we fix that first score column. We did. But the second column is wrong. Do a find and type in Oak as the customer. And hit enter. Okay. We have 2 targets and 2 actuals, kind of weird. Let's modify the first record and make their target 50. Okay, so they actually are under, but they are not amazing. So let's look at the error in that second button and see if we can detect it. And I'll look at it together. So let's go to that calculation. This one is more subtle. What do you think the error might be on this one? You guys are going to hate the answer because it's actually it's something we all learned in like algebra class in high school. It's order of operations.
Oh.
And you've got 2 math functions. You have a multiplication and a greater than. And the FileMaker did the math not in the order that you saw. Xavier, you saw that and you put in the parentheses. So the function work order times 2 needs to be there. By the way, that's one of the other reasons let functions are nice, because you can calculate those bits of data line by line You can work with multiple very, very small calculations. Even in something as small as this, I would write it as a let, because it would have fixed that error and I wouldn't have even known. Anyway, go ahead and click OK, because I think that should fix it. Nope, it's still broken. Okay, now we have some choices. I love this real world stuff so much. We could continue going back and forth and trying a bunch of stuff. And trying to figure out where we went wrong. But clearly, it's not adding up correctly. One of the other things we could do is we could talk about a best practice we tried earlier, which is the sampling feature of the data viewer, because that's going to allow us to see right what's going on. Before we do that, there's one other thing that I want to double check. I want to make sure that the field that we use to calculate the actual work order count is in fact a number field. This one is a nasty one. If you make a calculation, let's actually try something. Go to the manage database and go down to the field called work order actual. Yeah, work order count. Double click on it to modify it. Okay, in the bottom, it says the calculation result is a number. If it was not a number, go ahead and actually change it to text. Click OK and commit it. It looks the same. It's calculating the result and it's showing us the number, but it now cannot do math on it because its result is not numeric. So I thought for a moment that that was where the flaw lied, but that's not where the flaw lies. But that's one of the things you should be aware of. So let's go repair that and put it back. So that's just one of the things that you should have in your arsenal to kind of go looking at. So click OK, and now it's back to a number. Now go to layout mode and let's go to the that calculation that we wrote and copy that to the clipboard. And then go from there, we're going to go back the other way now to data viewer. And add a new one and paste it and see if it actually works. Okay, so click monitor and let's see if it actually works the same way. Go to browse mode and you can click from record to record and see if it actually shows you the same thing that we're seeing, and it does. It's still just wrong. Okay, let's double click on our calculation in our watch and we're going to rewrite this as a let. So just keep what we have and add a few hard returns and type in let, either at the top or bottom. The first thing you do is you add your square brackets right after the parentheses. The second thing you do is you put a closed square bracket right there and a semicolon and a couple of hard returns. Now you have your basic structure, right? You have your top half and your bottom half are sort of preset. Okay, we're gonna have we're gonna type quota equals, and then double click your field for target quota at the bottom left there. And then semicolon, new line, actual equals. And then we actually want another one, which is the actual times 2. So type in actual equals actual times 2. No, the word actual. times 2. Should this work?
Yeah, I assume.
Yeah, so it actually is serially going through from top to bottom. And it's first saying actual is this thing, and then now it's saying actual is itself plus something else or times something else or whatever. So this is a really, really good function. Okay, delete the case statement because we don't really need it anymore. And then now we're just going to use that lower area to sample. Type in quota. Just the word quota. And now we can see that it's actually evaluating the quota as 7. Change the word to actual. And then click monitor. And then flip through records and see if the math looks right. Yeah, it totally does, right? It's showing you the number times 2. And so this allows us to write our calculation bit by bit without going crazy. We can see that on the line we're on right now, Palm Heights is 22. Okay, so go back into your math with Palm Heights selected. By the way, it's kind of nice to look at a subset of data this time. So rather than the whole set, but it doesn't really matter that much. So frequently when I'm doing exactly what we're doing right now, I'll do a search for like 2 or 3 records that are sampled, a good sample, rather than all of my records, just to keep things simpler. Okay, double click on your last line. And now we're going to write a case in the area where that loss part is. You're getting good at this. Add a couple hard returns. And in this one, we can actually do something more simple. If actual is greater than quota, so actual greater than quota, then amazing. The word amazing. And that's all we need. That should now work. And click monitor. And now we'll test that one by flipping through records slowly and seeing if it actually matches to what's on the layout. And right there's one, let's see. There's another keyboard shortcut I want you to learn. See if you can, you're using the mouse to click on those. Try using control up arrow and control down arrow and see if that works. Yeah, do you see how that works? There's a keyboard shortcut to flip through records one at a time. That's hard to no one else. You guys can all just try that keyboard shortcut and you know what I mean. It's a really efficient way to move through records. On the Mac, there's one extra trick you have to put in because the Mac really wants to use that shortcut for the whole OS. Windows does not have a system-wide shortcut for that. But on the Mac, you have to tell it that FileMaker wants to use that shortcut as a record flipping thing. That keyboard shortcut is useful in layout mode, browse mode, and find mode. So it's definitely worth getting good at. And I can see you already love it. Okay. Does the math match? Unfortunately, it actually looks like it is still wrong. So for example, go to Walnut Square Center. The target is 7 and the actual is 4. That's not amazing. So double click with that record selected, double click on your function. And I really don't know what's going on with this. Who has ideas?
Can the two actuals, like actual equals customer work order, that's the exact same word. And then actual equals actual times 2. Does that get confusing?
Nope, that's not the source of the problem.
Okay.
I don't think it is anyway. So that's normal. It's a normal way to program is to actually do it that way. And we even looked at it. Oh, I think it's my bad again. Yeah, I think I gave you bad math to type. So I was thinking that it would need to actually be twice the actual. But it's really, if the actual is twice as good as the quota, not twice as good as the actual. Wait, I think I said that really badly. Here's what this math says right now. The actual sales of this customer is 4. We're saying, oh, we're going to give them 4 for free and call it 8. 8 is greater than 7. Therefore, they did amazing. That line is wrong. And that's entirely my fault. And I don't feel bad about that at all because we all get to learn. What's the correct math? That's it right there. The quota. So if they double the quota, not the actual, is what I meant to say. Let's see if that fixes it. Look, it's right. Yep. So Palm Heights Center, 8 and 11. But then if we look at one that really did kill their quota, like this one here, yeah, their actual is 30. You know, they did it. That's good. Okay, now that we've done that and figured out my error, you can go ahead and take that calculation. So part of this class, I make errors, some of them intentionally. This one was totally not intentionally. But that's okay. No programmer ever can have a day go by and not make errors like this. Okay, copy that to the clipboard and go to layout. Double click your button. So this may have been possible to solve by playing with it directly in the button bar widget, but I would submit it was easier to do in the data viewer. Okay, now if we're look at that, this is exactly how I want this to look. What other things can we do? We've got 10 more minutes, and like before, I'll stick around to answer questions after. This is really where I wanted to get to with this report. So I think you had some questions about queries, and we talked about different ways to query stuff. We talked about that you can query on a field. We talked about multiple find requests and omit requests, and the special case where omit operates differently if it's not the first record, the first request. We talked about using the equals, and you can only use equals in a find request that's locally in the table, not in a related field. We talked about sorting, but that's a pretty basic function. And we made a report that used, rather than using calculated fields, used button bars to display data when that makes sense. That's a lot. And using these tools and these methods, you can build some really cool features. We're going to continue with this and learn how to do things like create a report like this from a script, automatically do a really complex query, export the report as a PDF file, import the PDF back into the database, and email it to someone. So we can actually say, oh, I want to send the report to these 30 people. Push a button and it'll just do all that in a couple seconds. That's where we're going to get to in this class in the next couple days. Yeah, because reporting and like working with data, that's definitely a key thing. So these are today foundational tools to that end. Xavier, you were amazing to really take on so much of this and be the guinea pig. Your classmates have to step up and do that tomorrow. And then Susan, is it you weren't working correctly today, right? You weren't able to share?
Yes, I can't share.
Hopefully that will be fixed tomorrow.
Okay.
So I'll get on a little early and see if I can work on that with you, because I have ideas of on your Mac what to make that work, how to make that work.
Okay, thanks.
So I'll be on like 15 minutes early tomorrow if you want to do that.
I will try that.
Okay. Because I think it's a privilege, like a setting. If you can get someone from IT on hand for that as well.
They're supposed to be doing some updates to the computers this evening, and I can ask.
Okay, so maybe you could just ask them to add permission for Teams to be able to control, like as part of what they're doing tonight on your computer, to be able to basically go into the security settings and allow Teams to share the screen. That's a simple setting that a Mac administrator should know how to do. I know how to do it anyway. And it's in the privileges in the settings on the Mac. Apple really nails they really control those things application by application, feature by feature these days.
Okay.
Okay, what other things would you like? What other things do you dream about on a report like this? Any of you, all of you.
Matt, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around why you would put the calculation in a button instead of in the field.
It's really like a long-term database maintenance issue. If you have 5 or 10 different reports like this one that you want to do for different departments for different uses, and you just need to display data, using a layout calculation, using a button bar like we just did, puts the entire thing in one spot. And so there's no baggage. Like over time, if every single time you needed a calculation like this and you put it into the database structure in managed database, you're going to end up with hundreds of these fields, and you're not going to remember what they're for. So in other words, if you need to work like one time for the biennium or whatever, you need this one report that needs 10 calculated fields, and then you create them and you run the report, and then you delete the layout and you forget about it, and you don't need that ever anymore. If the fields are there, they're not going to get deleted automatically, and you're going to forget. And then every single time you go look at your fields, you're going to see them, and you're not going to remember what they're for, and it's going to be confusing. And it kind of makes the database harder to use over time. So I think it's a best practice to keep the structure as lean as possible.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really it. That's it.
Okay. We do have a report like that. I didn't build the database, and there are a lot of fields with that. And so
yeah,
this makes sense to me to do it this way because it's a once a year report.
Yeah.
And they're just looking at it. And so, yeah, okay.
But then there's that search thing and the sort thing. And if you need to search or sort, then they have to be in the structure. You can't.
They're not searching or sorting on it. It's actually being, I think they're just copying it over into another spreadsheet and then uploading it into another platform. So I don't think it's being searched on. No.
The second thing is, we haven't really got to it yet, but this feature using the button bar is actually much more powerful than what you can do in the calculation in the structure, because you can have a lot more of them. You can integrate other text into the button bar. You can mix and match like text and number type data in the calculation. You can combine it with conditional visibility and conditional formatting. You can use icons, which are not possible to use in the calculation because button bars actually have built-in icons.
Yeah.
So you can make them very graphical. So there's actually some things you just can't do that become possible when you use this method. So in addition to just being cleaner, there's some other things.
I like it.
Good, I'm glad. So I'll ask again, what other kind of things would you guys dream about on a report like this? Like, you know, different ways to visualize it. I just gave you one hint, like an icon, something graphical. In the beginner class, we added sub-summaries. So we already know a little bit how to do that. But what other things would you want? So if you don't have an answer for me now, because now it's 1, you can think about that. And as we keep working through reports, I would love it if you came up, even if it's like some other report you have in some other program, say, hey, Matt, how do we do this? I want to do this. I think it would be really fun if we can all work on that together to try to replicate really good report design from other places. So I'm going to wrap. I'll stop recording. And I want to say thank you very much for sticking with me today. And I look forward very much to seeing you guys tomorrow. I'll stick around for 10 or 15 minutes if there's any other questions for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have